Welcome to Murder Road Trip. I'm your host, Haley, and joining me on today's road trip to Leavenworth, Kansas is my friend Lacey.
Hey guys.
Today we will be snacking on salted nut rolls and train cookies as we discuss Carl Panzram. When I have a co-host, I ask them what topic they would like to cover. Lacey, why did you pick Carl Panzram?
I'm obsessed with him. I just love his story, and he's literally a product of his environment, and I just really think it's interesting how he perceived the world. So
yeah, he reminds me a lot of Donald Gaskins.
Yes.
With the reformatory school and then
constant abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe Carl Panzram was reincarnated into Donald Gaskins.
Oh, that's probably possible for sure. Like all the sodomy. It's just
I'll have to look into it more. Thank you for being my road trip buddy. Now let's get on the road.
We lost the station again.
keep trying.
I'm safe.
Hold on. Let me try this one.
Stop. That's it.
Turn it up.
Turn it up.
Charles Carl Panzram, don't know how they got Carl from Charles,
Lisp,
was born on June 28th, 1891, on a small farm in East Grand Forks, Minnesota. His German parents, John and Lizzie Panzram, had 4 other sons and 1 daughter. When Carl was 7 or 8 years old, his parents split up, and Lizzie was left to raise her 6 children on her own. Carl went to school during the day and would work on the farm until nightfall. Every time Carl did something even slightly wrong, he was scolded harshly and severely beaten. This would be the beginning of many years of childhood abuse he endured at the hand of a vast majority of the adults he encountered along the way. In 1903, at 11 years old, Carl decided he wanted to leave his abusive home. Before he left for good, Carl decided he needed to break into his rich neighbor's house and steal some things. He ended up only stealing some food and a pistol. Carl tried to get away on a train, but instead he was caught, arrested, beaten, and sent to the Minnesota State Training School in Red Wing, Minnesota.
The Minnesota State Training School had a motto: beat the goodness into the boys and the badness out. The school had around 250 boys who ranged from 7 to 21 years of age. The boys were divided into 5 cottages, where they were taught all about the Bible. If one of the boys didn't do a perfect job of reading their verses, they would be beat. Carl was beaten every Saturday night and an additional 3 to 4 times a week for the year that he was at the school.
Jesus.
I can't.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
I was surprised that they had children ranging from 7 to 21.
I know, that's such a huge age difference in like maturity levels, and obviously, if you have 21-year-olds that are acting terribly, like they're going to take it on the littler kids.
That's true.
The boys were taken to the painting house to be beaten. The house was named the Painting House because their bodies would be painted black and blue. In the house, the boys would be stripped naked, bent over a wooden block, and their hands tied to their ankles. Next, a large towel soaked in salt water was spread across their backs. The boys were then beaten with a large strap with holes punched throughout. The holes caused the skin to form blisters. After 25 minutes, the blisters popped and the saltwater towel would do its job. Carl attempted to escape the school many times, but he was never successful. However, Carl was successful in burning down the painting house by wrapping thick, long cotton strings around a stick, lighting it, and putting it on oil-soaked rags.
In January of 1905, Carl was released to his mother's custody from the school after telling the parole board how the school had helped reform him and gave him a love for Jesus. In his memoir, Carl stated that, "Naturally, I now love Jesus very much. Yes, I love him so damn much that I would like to crucify him all over again." I love that.
That's crazy, yeah. He knew exactly what to say, and oh man.
Carl's mother now lived on a farm in Grand Forks, North Dakota. He was expected to work on the farm. Carl did not enjoy working on the farm, so he asked his mother if he could go to school to be a preacher instead. His mother agreed, But he only lasted at the school for a few months before he was getting in fights with the other students and causing many problems for the teachers. For this, Carl would be beaten regularly as a punishment. After a while, Carl had enough of his teachers' beatings. He found a kid who owned a gun and brought it to class the next day. On March 29, 1906, Carl threatened his teacher. The teacher thought Carl was bluffing, so he told Carl to stand up for a whipping. At this point, Carl whipped out the gun and pulled the trigger 3 times. But to Carl's disappointment, the gun didn't go off. Carl was immediately sent home where he received a harsh and painful beating.
Carl ran away from home after receiving the beating. He hopped on a train and headed west to be a cowboy who shot Indians. While on the train, Carl met 4 big burly bums and told them about a warm, clean freight car with straw. The bums told Carl to take them to the car. He soon found out what the bums really wanted. He cried, begged, and pleaded with them not to do it. Although Carl's memoir does not describe what happened to him in that freight car, we can assume that he was molested. Carl said, "After that, I always went alone whenever and wherever possible." Carl hoboed around for a few months until he was arrested for petty larceny in Butte, Montana. He spent a month or 2 in jail before he was sent to the Montana State Reform School in Miles City, Montana. Carl would spend a year in the school before he escaped. After his escape, Carl headed west again.
On December 28, 1906, 16-year-old Carl Panzram was drinking in a Montana saloon when an Army recruiter showed up looking to recruit soldiers. Carl lied about his age. At the time, you had to be 21 to enlist, and he joined the Army. He was hauled off to Helena, Montana to join the 6th Infantry Regiment that same day. Within an hour of arriving in Helena, Carl was already in trouble for refusing to work. After doing something naughty to the Articles of War he was given, Carl was sentenced to spend a week in the guardhouse. He lasted only 2 days in the guardhouse before he was in trouble once again for fighting. His sentence was extended to 30 days. What do you think he did to the Articles of War?
I mean, put his dick through it.
I knew it had something to do with his dick. I just pictured him like peeing all over it.
Right? Or he like wiped his ass with it.
Yeah.
He drew a dick on it.
Yeah. On April 8, 1907, Carl walked off post with some stolen items. He was caught and court-martialed on April 20th. Carl was sentenced to 3 years in the Fort Leavenworth, Kansas military prison by the Secretary of War, William H. Taft. He was transferred to Fort Leavenworth from Helena on May 20th, 1907.
While in Leavenworth prison, Carl was able to burn a prison shop down, but he was unable to escape. After serving 37 months, Carl was released in 1910. The 20-year-old, 6-foot-tall, 190-pound Carl was given a ticket to Denver, Colorado. For the next few years, Carl traveled around the United States. During his travel, Carl worked many jobs, robbed, sodomized, and killed many people. He also served quite a few jail sentences. At one point, he tried to join the Mexican Army, but was unable to, so he continued to travel Mexico. He was able to join the Foreign Legion of Constitutional Army of Northern Mexico. What a fucking name. Like, you can't, cut it down to just
I know.
Northern Army of Mexico.
Right.
But after only a month, he deserted his post and continued his crime spree around the United States. In 1914, Carl was sentenced to 7 years in the Oregon State Prison for burglary. While in prison, Carl was subjected to many torture devices, including the jacket. Similar to a straitjacket, the jacket is a piece of heavy canvas about 4 feet long and 2.5 feet wide, with holes on both sides where a rope is put through and tightened. After about an hour, your blood would stop flowing and you would become numb.
The snorting pole. A man would be handcuffed to a 12-foot long by 1 foot wide pole and pulled off the ground. His clothes were then removed and he was whipped while other inmates looked on.
That's hot.
I think Carl Panzram wrote in there the reason it was called the snorting pole was because men would start snorting from the pain.
Yeah, I'm sure they were trying to get air, but they were also struggling to hold on while handcuffed.
Mm-hmm.
The next was the hummingbird. A steel bathtub was filled with 4 to 5 inches of ice-cold water. Then a man would be submerged into the water face down and strapped in. Next, the torturer would take a sponge attached to electrical wires and start at the man's feet and work his way up.
Pass. No thanks.
No thanks. It's like being electrocuted but not dying.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God. Well, Carl Panzram was saying that they would have a doctor in there and they would, electrocute them for a while and then they would check the pulse and be like, he's not dead yet.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
Keep this party going.
It's awful. In June of 1915, Carl was transferred to the Salem State Penitentiary. While in the Salem State Penitentiary, Carl saw many wardens come and go. His last warden, Warden Murphy, had a different way of doing things. Murphy told Carl that if he promised not to try to escape, he would, quote, open the gates and let Carl out as long as he came back by dinner. That is ballsy.
I know, that was such a crazy move, especially like the previous wardens like just punished Carl over and over again, and this one was like, let's give him a chance.
Right. Carl had intended on escaping the first time the gates opened, but when they finally did, he found himself dumbfounded. He came back that night and would continue to come back for 7 to 8 months until one night. On this particular evening, Carl was out getting drunk with a girl when he heard a freight train calling his name. So he promptly hopped on the train, burglarized a home in Tangent, Oregon, and was caught a week later. On December 3rd, 1915, Carl pled not guilty at his trial for the Tangent burglary and assault. He was convicted and sentenced to 8 years for the assault and 2 years for the burglary.
In May of 1918, Carl successfully escaped the Salem State Penitentiary when he dressed up as a cook and walked out. That is crazy. Like, they were like, oh, we have cook clothes hanging around, and he was just like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking put these on and leave.
It's like a movie.
Yeah. After his escape, Carl continued his crime spree across America. In New York, he became a seaman, naturally, and was able to take his crime spree across the world. In the summer of 1920, Carl was back in New York. He traveled up to Connecticut and robbed William H. Taft's, the fucking former president's, house, and he made off with $40,000, or $470,742 in today's money, in jewelry and bonds, $3,000 in cash, or $35,305 in today's money, and a gun. Carl took the money, bought a yacht, the Akista, and took his crime spree to the water.
What?
I know. He was like, oh, I'm a seaman now. I gotta get a boat. I'm gonna fuck dudes on the water.
Not just a boat, a yacht.
A yacht. Well, I think, like, during the 20s, like, yachts were, like, the big thing to have. It's like Escalades in 2000.
I just wish he would have got, like, a pontoon.
I just love that he fucking robbed William Taft. He was like, oh, you're gonna sign my fucking warrant for Leavenworth? I'm gonna take your fucking money and jewelry.
Yeah, he held a grudge.
Yes.
During his crime spree, Carl hired men under the guise that they would be his sailors. When they got on the Akista, Carl would rob, rape, shoot, and kill them. Then he would tie a rock to the sailor's body, put them in his rowboat, row about a mile into the main channel, and dump them.
So romantic.
I hope there were candles.
Not on a yacht. That's dangerous.
That's true. Carl also robbed other yachts similar to how a pirate robbed other ships.
So he wanted to be a cowboy. He couldn't be a cowboy. Then he wanted to be an army man. He couldn't be an army man. So then he was like, oh, fuck it, I'm going to be a pirate.
Yeah, what else is there to do?
That's right.
The water crime spree lasted for 3 weeks. Carl returned to Connecticut to rob again, but he was subsequently caught and sentenced to 6 months in jail. Carl didn't serve the 6-month sentence because he jumped bail, got on a ship, and headed to Africa.
And that's why now you can't get bond if you are a flight risk.
Yeah. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Carl. You fucking ruin everything.
God. While in Africa, Carl raped and killed an 11 or 12-year-old boy in a park. Carl said, quote, his brains were coming out of his ears when I left him. Cool. After killing the boy, Carl hired 6 Africans to take him out on a canoe to go crocodile hunting. That's where I want to hunt crocodiles from, a fucking canoe.
Yeah, with 6 other people in it. Like, no, there's no fucking way.
While hunting, Carl shot all 6 men in the back, reloaded, and then shot them again in the head. Gotta make sure they're dead, man.
He really wanted that fucking canoe.
Then he dumped their bodies over into the water and let the crocodiles work their magic.
I just pictured, like, David Copperfield as an alligator, like, making their bodies disappear. Carl continued his crime spree until he arrived in Salem, Massachusetts in July of 1922. While in Salem, Carl raped and then murdered a boy with a rock. He was either 11 or 12. After murdering the boy, Carl stole multiple yachts to continue his lifelong crime spree. At one point, a man tried to rob Carl, so Carl shot him twice, tied him to a heavy piece of lead, and threw him overboard. Carl continued his travels until he was arrested again. He was able to get out of jail by giving his lawyer a stolen yacht. That's so fucking baller. Like, who's like, hey, you know what? If you don't let me go to jail, I'm going to give you a yacht.
The lawyer's like, I'll take that deal.
In New Haven, Connecticut, Carl raped a boy, then tied the boy's belt around his neck, strangled him to death, and threw his body into some bushes. By the time Carl was 31 years old, he had traveled to more than 30 countries.
Damn.
While in White Plains, New York, Carl was sentenced to 5 years in Sing Sing prison for burglary. In late October, he was transferred to Dannemora prison, aka the Siberia of America. While in Dannemora, Carl tried to escape many times. At one point, he fell 30 feet to a concrete walk. He broke both of his ankles, both legs, fractured his spine, and ruptured himself. He laid in the hospital but was returned to his cell with no medical attention after 5 days. It would take 8 months before Carl could walk with crutches, and another few months before he could walk with a cane.
Damn.
That's fucking crazy. He never, did anything while he was outside of prison, but while he was there, he just wanted out so bad that he would literally almost kill himself.
14 months after the fall, Carl had surgery to remove one of his testicles due to the rupture. He made it just 5 days post-surgery before he was caught raping another inmate.
I mean, you're a testicle down, and you still have more testosterone than most of the men in prison. That's crazy. And you're fucking crippled from the fall that you just had. And you're still like, I gotta stick my dick in this guy. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Insatiable.
Carl was returned back to his cell with no further medical treatment. He was released from prison 5 years later. 18 days after his release, Carl had already performed 6 to 8 robberies, and only 2 days later, Carl murdered someone in Baltimore, Maryland.
He moves fast.
12 days after the Baltimore murder, Carl performed another burglary in Washington, D.C., and another 2 burglaries in Baltimore just 2 days after that. Carl was arrested for the 2 burglaries in Baltimore and was taken to Washington, D.C. to stand trial on August 10, 1928. While in the D.C. prison, Carl confessed to killing 3 boys. He also began writing his memoirs after Henry Lesser, a corrections officer, gave him writing materials. Carl was sentenced to 25 years for his crimes. He would serve his sentence in Fort Leavenworth prison. Poor guy had to head there again.
Yeah, he loved it in Kansas.
He was transferred from D.C. to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas on January 30th, 1929.
Carl Panzram decided he wanted out of this cruel world. He knew he could not escape the prison, so he devised a plan that would help him leave the world. On June 20th, my motherfucking birthday, 1929, Carl beat laundry foreman Warnicki to death with a 10-pound iron bar. He eventually walked back to the near cell and waited for the guards to come get him. While in the isolation cell, Carl would continue writing his memoirs and sending them to Lesser. On December 5th, 1929, a Kansas City, Kansas grand jury indicted Carl Panzram for first-degree murder. Carl requested that he defend himself in court. He did not need a defense attorney. On April 15, 1930, Carl was taken to court in Topeka, Kansas. Prior to his trial, Carl met with a psychiatrist, Dr. Carl Miniger, famous for founding the Miniger Foundation and Clinic in Topeka. This meeting lasted for 50 minutes, then Carl was escorted back to the courtroom.
50 minutes is all you need.
Yeah, I can pretty much sum up somebody in 50 seconds.
I know, that's how you are.
Yeah, I'm just I don't like them.
Boom. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, get on my face.
Carl pled not guilty to the murder charge. The state called 3 inmate witnesses to testify against Carl. The prosecution rested within an hour. Against Carl's wishes, the defense requested that he be reviewed by the Sanity Commission. The judge agreed and adjourned court until 4 p.m.
So I think it's interesting that he did not guilty, because that immediately, as soon as they decided they were going to prosecute him, if he pled not guilty and was found guilty, that pushed him to the death penalty. He knew what he was doing exactly. It's crazy.
And I also think it's crazy that they're doing all of this while the trial is happening. The way it works now, of course, is he would have been found competent to stand trial prior to the actual trial beginning.
Right.
But now they're like, yeah, let's give it a couple hours. We'll meet back at 4.
He's like, oh, I'm hungry. And they're like, well, you got to meet with that doctor, and then you can have a sandwich, and then you're coming back to court to defend yourself.
So crazy. The Sanity Commission found Carl to be of an unsound mind, but that he knew what he was doing when he killed the laundry foreman. He was found competent to stand trial. When court was back in session, the defense did not call any witnesses. Instead, the attorney called Carl to testify, but Carl just sat in silence because he was like, I didn't ask for a defense attorney.
Yeah, he was like, I'm going to cross-examine myself, I'm going to testify, and then I'm going to have to talk to myself. And fuck you guys, I don't have to talk to you.
Exactly. Eventually, the defense rested and the jury left to make their decision. It took them a mere 45 minutes to return a verdict. The judge adjourned court until the morning. I also thought that was interesting. Just read the verdict and get it over with.
Yeah, it was like he was trying to build suspense or something, but this was, back in the 30s and newspapers didn't come out. Like, nobody would have known.
Right. The next morning, the judge read the verdict. Unsurprisingly, the jury had found Carl guilty of first-degree murder. The judge also said Carl was to be, quote, remanded to the care of the warden at the federal penitentiary at Leavenworth, there to be confined until the 5th day of September when, between the hours of 6 and 9 o'clock in the morning, you shall be taken to some suitable place within the confines of the penitentiary and hanged by the neck until dead. Damn!
And they found him guilty after he sat on the stand for 45 minutes in complete silence. So they were just like, fuck this guy. You're dead.
And I just thought it was so interesting that, well, now, of course, you're either found guilty or not guilty in court, and then you have a separate hearing with a sentencing to be sentenced. But this judge was like, not only are you guilty, but I already have my sentence picked out for you.
Yeah, they had already decided, which, I mean, that was pretty much Carl's life. People had already decided what he was once they saw him.
It's true.
Carl was told he had 90 days to appeal. He would not appeal. On June 20th, again my birthday, 1930, Carl was tired of waiting for his execution. He attempted suicide by eating a plateful of poisoned beans, but he was unsuccessful.
Poor guy.
I know. What a terrible birthday present, Carl.
How dare you?
How dare you?
On my birthday?
Poisoned beans? Meanwhile, the prison was having a difficult time trying to figure out how to hang Carl. They eventually figured out that they could hang a 13-foot rope from the armory with a concrete weight attached. It was calculated that the 212-pound Carl would need at least a 7-foot, 8-inch drop to be successfully hung. Like, Fort Leavenworth has never hung anyone. That's how they're acting. They're like, we're mathematicians now. We have to devise an...
Well, they hadn't done it for so long. They were, like, pulling out blueprints and stuff.
Building fucking... That's crazy. On September 5th, 1930, at 6:01 a.m., Carl Panzram was hung, which 1 minute after the judge said, I mean, between 6 and 9, nobody ever shows up on time for that.
They fucking did.
Right? He was pronounced dead at 6:18 a.m. His body was sent to the mortuary, where an autopsy was conducted. His official cause of death was dislocation cervical vertebrae, strangulation, legal execution. That's a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
After the autopsy, Carl was buried on Peckerwood Hill, appropriately, a slope directly west of the prison.
And Lacey and I, a couple days ago, actually drove out to Leavenworth and we found the cemetery.
They were closed.
We couldn't go in.
It was trespassing.
We did take pictures, and it really is a slope.
It really, yeah. I mean, it's crazy how it looks, and then you can't even see most of the headstones because they're flat on the ground.
So you can just mow right over them.
Perfect, even though nobody's allowed out there because it's trespassing.
That's so ridiculous.
We're closed.
In total, Carl Panzram said he killed 21 people and raped more than 1,000 boys and men.
No wonder he was done. He was exhausted.
Yeah, his penis was like, I'm done.
Yeah, that his testicle ruptured itself.
Henry Lesser spent decades trying to find a publisher to publish Carl Panzram's memoir. In 1970, Lesser was successful. The memoir was published as Killer, a Journal of Murder. You can find more information about Carl Panzram in Panzram by Thomas Gaddis and James Long. That's where all the information from this episode came from.
Very nice.
The book is really cool. It's basically Panzram's diary entries or his memoir, and then the authors, Gaddis and Long, they actually go in and they write in some extra like facts to sort of corroborate
like what was documented.
Exactly. And then at the end it stops being like his diary and becomes his letters back and forth with Henry.
Okay. I really think the relationship he had with Henry was interesting too, because for so long he never was able to trust anyone in any of the institutions he was in, and Henry like slowly gained his trust, like, and would give him stuff so he could write his memoirs. I thought that was really amazing.
Yeah, not only did he not trust anybody, but he especially didn't trust screws or correctional officers.
Yeah,
I mean, something similar happened with Charles Bronson, who, is a favorite of mine.
He's also a favorite of mine.
I love him, and I feel so bad for him. Same thing happened with Charles Bronson. He's treated as this horrible, horrible person. Right. He's the most notorious criminal in the UK, but he's never killed anybody. And he was being kept in like the Hannibal cage or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of the corrections officers brought him some like art supplies, and that made him calm down. And now he's famous for his artwork, and he sells his artwork and donates all the money to charity.
Right.
It's like one act of kindness to these people that have lived a life full of horribleness, and just one act of kindness.
Well, it's like they question their worth, obviously, and then like the warden in Oregon like really showed him like a trusting hand and like would let him out, and then he broke that trust. But still, like that was a good relationship that he had. It was probably the first one he'd ever experienced.
And he said in his memoir he felt like he didn't want to disappoint the warden.
Right.
By leaving. He's like, I had every intention of leaving, but
he obviously had daddy issues. Like, his dad left him. He couldn't be a stripper, so he sodomized and burglarized everything he could. And
set everything on fire.
And then he had a new daddy at Oregon State.
It's true. Yeah. You have any other thoughts on Carl Panzram?
No, girl. That was good.
There was so much information to sort through. I know I was telling you this. I was like, one of our favorite podcasts, Last Podcast on the Left, did a multi-part episode, and I was like, could have done that too, but it would basically be Carl broke into this place and was sentenced to this many days in jail, and then he did not serve those days in jails and went to this place.
Then he escaped this jail.
It was just easier to be like, he had a crime spree all around the world.
He went to 30 countries. He's a world traveler.
Yeah, because it would have been 2 episodes of us just saying, and then he went here, and then he went here. And not that I don't want to provide the information, but it gets repetitive.
Well, and we don't do any funny voices like those guys. It's just not as entertaining. So
no, that's true.
They had, though, a documentary on Netflix about him at one point, and it's not up there anymore. But I watched it, like, every weekend for probably 2 months because it was just so interesting to me. But it was really intense. He had a very intense life, so. But I really enjoyed it.
Man. I'm going to say something that is probably controversial. I think he looks like Jude Law.
He does look like Jude Law, and the guy that played him in the documentary, he looked like Jude Law too.
I'm onto something.
You are.
So to end the episode, would you like to play a road trip game?
Yes, obviously.
All right. It's going to be a short one.
Okay.
All right. Was this person incarcerated in the Leavenworth prison?
Oh, shit, son.
You ready?
Yes.
Michael Vick.
Yes.
You're right. James Earl Ray.
Is that the guy that killed Martin Luther King Jr.? Yes,
girl.
he was.
Yep. Whitey Bulger.
No.
He was.
God damn it.
I love Whitey Bulger. I want to start a mob podcast just to talk about him. I am so obsessed with Whitey Bulger.
Let's do it. And I'll come on that one too.
Everything about him. Like, I read Black Mass, and I had to create like a spreadsheet, almost like the red like string.
You had like the Charlie Day like crazy conspiracy theory
Who
wall.
was Pepe? Yeah, I did, because I was like, wait, what? Who is this person? And they're just becoming intertwined with the FBI and the shit that went down. The movie, I thought, did not portray how crazy stuff really was.
I don't think that it did either.
Wesley Snipes.
No.
You're right. Timothy McVeigh.
No.
You're right. Last one. Charles Ng.
Oh. Yes.
You're right. He was sent there after he stole a bunch of stuff in Hawaii.
He went to Leavenworth from Hawaii?
Yeah, it's like the most popular military prison.
Well, I mean, it's the prettiest.
It is. We're going to post pictures. It's so pretty.
It's so pretty.
Yeah, I was like looking up celebrities that are known people that are in federal prison, which is much harder.
Oh, yeah.
Because as we've talked about, Leavenworth is a federal prison, so I couldn't be like Lil Wayne.
Lil Wayne. No, not Fort Leavenworth.
Yeah, I was surprised by how many, quote, famous people have been in there.
Michael Vick was probably the one that surprised me the most, just because it's obviously a heinous crime, but to be sent to federal prison for that, like, I think that was probably good for him, but it's just nuts that's where they chose to send him from where he was.
There are a lot of football players that have been sent to Leavenworth. I just didn't know their names.
I mean, you're not that... I mean, I would probably know their names.
I didn't know their names, and that's not fun for me.
That's not fun.
Yeah, just, like, crazy. All the people that have been... And then Chelsea Manning, who was just let out.
Just let out, yeah. And then there was a politician that was there, I want to say in the 30s. He ran, like, all of Kansas City.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, and he got sent there for tax evasion.
Okay, I read about that. I just didn't recognize the name.
That's why when you said Wesley Snipes, I was like, oh, tax evader. No, I don't think so.
Yeah. God, what a guy.
Yeah.
I don't like the glasses he wears.
Mm-mm.
I'm just going to put that out there.
I don't like most of his movies, so no.
That was Carl Panzram.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming along for the ride.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
I had a great time.
Yeah.
I can't wait to show everyone the pictures.
I know. Oh, that's such a pretty prison.
It really does look like a castle. And the dome on the top of it, like, how shitty that somebody that was in prison had to build that and make it look so nice.
Mm-hmm. Like, make it nice because we're going to be living here.
Make it real pretty for Daddy.
I want to give a huge shout out to content editor Laura Taylor for making my research sound coherent. I would also like to apologize for the sound quality of the first 2 episodes. We have reproduced the episodes and hopefully they sound much better. I am happy to announce a contest for everyone who leaves a review. If you leave a review in the month of August or September, you will be entered to win the Murder Road Trip Survival Pack. You can find more details on our website or any social media site. You can find Murder Road Trip at murderroadtrip.com, on Instagram and Twitter at murdertrip, and on Facebook at MRT Podcast. If you're interested in continuing the discussion, you can join the Murder Road Trip podcast group on Facebook. Make sure to check out the Murder Road Trip playlist on Spotify. You can join me in adding songs to the playlist. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe on your podcast app of choice. Please stay tuned after the music to hear from some other great podcasts. Until next time, please remember to check your back seats, and I'll see you at the next rest stop.
Kia ora, I'm Jess, the host of the Kiwi Crimes podcast. Each week, I'll share a missing persons or murder case from New Zealand. I discuss cases that are well known, as well as cases that you might not have heard of. Some cases will be recent and ongoing, while others will be cold. Full-length episodes are released fortnightly, and minisodes are released on the in-between weeks. You can find Kiwi Crimes anywhere you get your podcasts. I hope you'll join me as I explore the cases that rocked New Zealand. Ka kite anō.
You don't have to be from Philadelphia to love the Twisted Philly podcast.
There's more mischief, mayhem, and nefarious goings-on in the city of brotherly love than Billy Penn could have ever imagined. We've got it all here on the Twisted Philly podcast.
Hi, I'm Dina Marie, the host of Twisted Philly. Join me every week for some of my favorite stories from the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. We'll talk about true crime, haunted history, legends and local lore, plus some of my most favorite places to visit all around Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. You can follow me on social media, on Facebook at The Twisted Philly Podcast, and on Twitter at Twisted_Philly. And you can find my show on all major podcast apps. Plus, if you're a Patreon supporter, you get access to exclusive content twice a month that isn't available to other listeners. Join me every week in Twisted Philly.
Hey, this is Sarah, Sam and Casey from Just Another Murder Podcast.
We are three Aussie ladies chatting about murder and making funny jokes.
More like bad jokes.
Inappropriate jokes.
Sorry.
Go listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Insta, Twitter and Facebook. Okay.
Bye.
Catch ya.
See ya. Bye. Bye.